For those of you who haven't had the pleasure of working with Josh yet, he's been in Consensus for 1.5 years already. We are going to have to celebrate that very soon. I think you're seeing a picture of Josh when he joined Consensus, and neither Josh nor myself look like we used to look when those pictures were taken. He has grown tremendously. He's doing fantastic job. He graduated with a bachelor's in business management with a minor in operational excellence, and he does bring that to the table, as well as he's a certified Lean Six Sigma Green Belt. So Lean and operational excellence are at the core of everything that Josh does. So again, Josh, thank you so much. Yeah. And I like your beard. You know that I do.
Yeah,
I'm a fan.
I think it's time to get rid of that profile picture, but that's all right. Yeah, no, MRP is probably one of my favorite subjects. Definitely in SAP Business One. I think it gives the most room for growth within some of our customers. And you'll learn, and we'll sort of talk about this here in a bit, is that it's really great to be used for everybody. Again, MRP only spits out recommendations, so it's not like it's set in stone or you're creating journal entries and things like that. So if you are on the fence about whether or not you should be using MRP, my advice to all of our customers is just to try it out, right? So yeah.
Great. Also, that was something that I wanted to ask you now before we actually went into the content. Is I think that some people think MRP is only for manufacturing companies, and that is not the case, correct? Anybody can use and take advantage of it.
Right. In this demonstration, I sort of walked through, a bill of materials that has different component items in it, some of which we buy and other which we make. And as you'll notice through the order recommendations, it does do recommendations for both purchasing and production. So if you're on either side of those, or maybe you're a blend of both, MRP shouldn't limit you to if you can run MRP. So again, I think it's great for all of our customers to be using, even if it's in just a simulation mode. You can certainly see the benefit of MRP and kind of bypass some more and get into some more lean manufacturing, inventory processes and procurement processes. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Josh. So both of us, we're going to just close our cameras now so that we can enjoy the presentation. And let's get started with the presentation. Thank you.
Welcome to MRP and SAP Business One. So let's start off with the definition of what MRP means. MRP is defined as materials requirements planning. And what MRP does is it compares what we have in stock and then what we have in our supply and demand for that item. And then what SAP does is, based upon that scenario that we define, what are the recommendations for that item to either be bought or made, right? Depending on if it's a component item, a finished good, a buy or a make item. That's all dependent upon what we have in Business One. How I like to break down MRP is use another module within Business One, which we call the available to promise module. And if you're not familiar with it, that's fine. Basically, what the available to promise is a equation that analyzes what is in stock, right, plus what we have ordered, and then minus what we have committed, right? So let's break this down a little bit. In stock is pretty simple, right? What we have in the warehouse, and that might be a physical, digital, internal, or external warehouse, just as long as that warehouse is defined within SAP Business One. So what we have in stock in those warehouses, right? Next, what's on order. So this could be for open purchase orders or production orders. And these are items that we're expecting to have in stock, right? We're planning for the future, and based upon the due dates, which we'll talk about here in a second, what we think we're going to have in stock as of a given day, right? And then last but not least, committed, which is what I like to refer to as allocated, right? So what we have here is what is on open sales orders, open production orders, or open inventory transfer requests. Now let's break this down, right? Because we've got a production order on both the ordered and committed. This is important to note because on our ordered side of things, this is going to be for open production orders for finished goods. Whereas on our committed side of things, it's going to be more so the component items. And then last but not least, the inventory transfer request. That's only going to be applicable if you do have multiple warehouses within SAP Business One. So now that we've got a better understanding of what MRP is, there's a couple of things that we want to consider. Most of these are set up in the item master data, more so specifically the planning tab of the item master data. So the two things that are prerequisites, they need to be defined before we run our MRP scenario, is that the item must be MRP controlled and that the procurement method is defined. So whether this be buy or make, this is going to affect our recommendations that come out of the MRP scenario. The reason why the item being MRP controlled is so crucial is because whenever we do run that scenario, if the item is not MRP controlled, then it's going to exclude that from our list of items that we can select for this MRP scenario. Some other things that we might want to consider while we're running our MRP scenario is our document dates, more so our due dates and our delivery dates, right? This is kind of the crux of MRP, right? SAP Business One, as you know, is very date sensitive, and MRP is no exception to that. So based upon those dates, it's going to offer different recommendations. We also can get around this, but you do want to make sure that you have a good confidence level in your dates within SAP Business One. Next, we need our inventory, purchasing, and sales unit of measures defined within our item master data. This is really important, especially if you have scenarios where you have an inventory unit of measure to multiple items within that sales unit of measure, right? So the way that I like to describe this is kind of like eggs, right? So let's say we're a grocery store and we're going to keep track of these items or eggs by the actual egg themselves or in each, right? Whereas we've got a sales unit of measure where we only really sell them by the dozen or the half dozen, right? And in that dozen, there's of course going to be 12, right? So what we'd have set up here is our inventory unit of measures each, right? And then our sales unit of measure would then include 12 of those inventory unit of measures, right? So that we get our dozen or, half dozen, whatever that might be. Next, we want to have our order interval. This is really important if you do have this set up, because this will push things back and add a lead time as to when the next order is going to be placed with that vendor, or if it's going to be a different production order. Let's say you only run that on Friday, or you only purchase that every Friday with that certain vendor, whatever that might be, it's going to add that lead time to the MRP scenario. Next, we've got our order multiple. Our order multiple is kind of like going back to our eggs example. Let's say we need 2 eggs to bake a cake, right? The recipe calls for those 2 eggs, but we don't have those, right? I can't go to the store and say, hey, can I only have 2 eggs, right? Our order multiple there is going to be 12, right? Because we can only buy them in dozens. Okay. Next, we've got our minimum order quantity. This minimum order quantity is going to be set up with either you and your vendor, or maybe the minimum production order size that you have for this item, right? Depending on if the items bought or made. Next, we have our lead time. Our lead time is going to be our standard, our average lead time to produce this item or to get this item into stock. So this is going to come into play if you have a certain due date that you'll need to take into effect and order that early so that you can accommodate those lead times. Next, we kind of want to know whether we're going to be considering this for the entire company, or if it's an individual warehouse or maybe a group of warehouses, right? And again, going back to the first slide, this can be virtual, physical, internal, external warehouses. Again, just as long as they're defined within SAP Business One. This is going to be really important whenever we're setting up our scenario. Next, we've got forecasts, which we'll talk about in the next slide. And last but not least, our holidays, right? This is going to come into play whenever our production schedule maybe is only 4 days a week, right? Or 4/10s. So we can only produce those items for on 4 out of the 7 days of the week. This might come into play also where you have certain vendors that have unique holidays or whatever that might be, that's going to affect that lead time. We see this a little bit less with our vendors, only because the way I like to think about it is that whenever you order something from overseas, right, the boat's not going to stop shipping or moving those goods to you on the weekends, right? That ship is constantly moving. Same with other transportation methods. So that's more so on our production side of things. So we talked a little bit about forecasts, and forecasts are nothing more than a way to artificially create demand or an anticipated demand based upon maybe historical averages or what you think might be coming up, right? So these forecasts can be viewed on 3 different types of periods, right? So we've got our daily, weekly, and monthly periods. And those are going to fit within the horizon periods or planning horizon, right? So let's say, for example, it's for the for January through June, we're going to have a 6-month planning horizon there. So we can view it by days, weeks, or months. So we've kind of got a multitude of ways that we can create forecasts within Business One. We kind of break these out into where you're at in your system, right? As of right now, it's probably if you're maybe new to the system, right? You're just starting on SAP Business One, you're just getting started with MRP, and you do have forecasts that you have in Excel. Sure, we can absolutely do that. It's as simple as copy and paste, maybe make some minor adjustments to the template so that we can just pull those into Business One. Or if maybe, let's say you've been running SAP Business One now for a year or maybe more, and you've got more a little historical data within the system, we can certainly use historical information from SAP. So now there's 2 different methods if we are going to be using that historical data. There's basic and there's intelligent. Now, I will warn you that intelligent, you'll need HANA Analytics for that. So the 2 methods that we can use the intelligent forecasting is forecast generation rather, is triple exponential smoothing or linear regression, dampened trend, and seasonal adjustments. This is going to be really important depending on what type of statistical format you want to use to create that forecast. And then more on the basic side of things, it could be a simple average or a monthly average, depending on what you're looking for here. Maybe if you're just starting with MRP, or just starting with forecasts as well, maybe we could just start with the basic forecast generation. So depending on how we set up that forecast, be it consuming it forward or backwards, this forecast is going to fluctuate as we consume those or as we sell those items or so on and so forth. So without further ado, let's get into SAP Business One and show you how MRP works. So before we can start developing our MRP scenario, we need to make sure our building block in the item master data is set up properly. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to navigate into my item for VER-3, where you can go into your inventory tab and then your item master data. Now that I've got this pulled up, the first thing I want to do is go to my header information here and denote whether this item is an inventory item, a sales item, or a purchasing item. In this case, this is an item that we both produce and that we can drop ship from a different vendor if needed. So I have all 3 checked here. If an item is not an inventory item, it won't be able to be included into the MRP scenario, as we're not keeping track of the stock levels within SAP Business One. Next, we'll go into our purchasing data. Again, if this applies to this item, or to your item rather, this item is a purchasing item, so we will need to put in a purchasing unit of measured name. So the difference between the purchasing unit of measured name and our items per purchasing unit is that this is what we're buying it as on a normal basis, and this is how many inventory unit of measures are in this purchasing unit of measure. So in this case, going back to our egg example, we're buying this by the dozen, right? So our our items per purchasing unit is going to be 12 here because our inventory data is stored in eaches. Same goes for the sales data. In this case, it's just a one-to-one relationship since we're selling it by the each and then storing it by the each. So this information is going to be crucial to the recommendations that SAP is spitting out. So last but not least, we've got our inventory data. Again, this item is controlled by eaches, but what we also want to see is that these items are not locked in certain warehouses where that inventory might be coming from. And if you look here in our inventory table, we've got that equation that I was talking about earlier. So our in stock plus ordered minus committed gets us our available. So here you'll see that we've got 20 out on an open sales order, and we can verify this by right-clicking and going into our available to promise. And this will show that we have a sales order that's open for this item within this date. So I can go ahead and drill into the sales order to make sure everything looks correct here. And once I verify that everything looks good, and we're within the correct dates, I can close out of this and move on with my process. Now that I've verified that this item is indeed unlocked for all of our warehouses or the warehouses that we're going to be considering in this MRP scenario, I can go to my planning data tab. And for the MRP circumstance here, this is going to be your most important tab within the item master data. This first field here, a planning method, will allow the item to either be included within MRP or not included in MRP, so that you don't have all that clutter whenever you're looking for items within your MRP scenario. Next, I want to know what our default procurement method is. In this case, for this item, we are producing this item mainly. So I'm going to leave this as make. We can certainly change that. If the item is both a manufactured item and a purchased item, we can kind of denote whether or not we want to be purchasing that item at the very end of our MRP scenario. Next, we've got our order interval. So in this case, we're just going to be ordering this item whenever we feel the need for it. I do have a weekly setup here, so that'll be rolled up on like a Friday or something like that. So you can certainly include that. You'll just need to define it first. Next, we've got our order multiple. So again, going back to our egg example, if we can only order these in multiples of 12, like whenever we go to the grocery store, say our recipe only calls for 2 eggs, but we can only buy them by the 12 pack or the dozen from the store. This is where you'll need to define that quantity here. Next, we've got our minimum order quantity. So this is going to be for either the minimum production size or the minimum purchase order that you can create for this item at once. So basically what this is going to say is, again, if we only need 2 of those, but our minimum order size is 12, then SAP is always going to recommend that we either produce or purchase at the 12 quantity of 12. Last but not least, we've got our lead time here. Our lead time is going to be crucial to adding those days based upon an average lead time scenario on when we think this item is going to be in stock. So now that we've got this all set up, we're good to go with the item master data, and we can start working our way through the forecast and then through the MRP scenario, and then eventually our order recommendations. Now that we've got our item master data set up, I want to start moving into our forecasting. So I could do one of 2 things in my forecasts. I can either create a new one from scratch, maybe export it from Excel, or I can generate using a few statistical methods here. So the first thing that I want to do if I'm going to create a new forecast is I'm going to click Control-A, use my Add button. I'm going to come up with a name for this forecast here. And then let's say, for example, I wanted to run this for the next few months here, just till the end of the year or till the first of the year. I could either keep it for just November and December, and then I could view these periods in days, weeks, or months. I'm just going to leave it as monthly because I think that's a lot of the way that our customers run their forecasts today. You're certainly more than willing to change it. So what I could do now is if I do, maybe I'm just getting started in Business One and I have pre-existing forecasts that I have maybe in Excel. What I can do is just toggle to Excel. and I could just copy and paste all of my information over into my table by right-clicking and then clicking paste. Here, SAP is going to ask us if we need to, or if we have any header information, and in this case, I do. So what I'm going to do is click yes, and we should populate all of our information that we brought over from Excel. Of course, this is a smaller example, just so everyone can see how quick it is to pull that in, but you can also have this for large amounts of data. So I'm going to go ahead and add this. If you did want to generate your own forecast based upon historical information or through advanced statistical methods, what we can do is in the bottom right-hand corner here, we can click Generate Forecast, and then we can go through the basic forecast or the intelligent forecast, depending on what you're looking for. I'm going to go ahead and add this forecast now. And that's it. That's as easy as setting up a forecast. So now that I've created my forecast and I validated my item master data, what I can do is I can toggle to my MRP wizard. And this is going to be the start of our MRP scenario. Now, this first window in our MRP wizard is just a walkthrough of what MRP is. So we can go ahead and skip through this. Click next, where we can select an existing scenario. This is going to be more helpful whenever you're more familiar with your inventory levels, you've got a little bit more confidence in them, and you've started to use MRP quite extensively. This is going to be really helpful so that you can run these scenarios really quickly on a moment's notice, right? So instead of going through and setting up a new scenario every time, what I can do is I can just select run, and that'll run the scenario for me without having to set anything up. In this case, what I want to do is I want to create a new scenario. I'm going to go ahead and call this CD22, customer day 22. So then we'll click next. Here is probably the most important setup of all. This is going to be our planning horizon. And why this is so important is because you've heard me mention so many times now that SAP is extremely date sensitive. And SAP is only going to bring these together or include information that's within this planning horizon. Certainly there's a way to bypass that. But for now, we just want to make sure that we have very strict control of our dates. So in this case, I'm only going to run this for the months of November and December. So I'll do 11/01 for the start date and 12/31 for the end date. Here I can view this in periods of certain days, weeks, or months. So maybe I wanted to view this in every 3-day increments. I can certainly do that. For now, I'm just going to leave this as in days. Or if you wanted to maybe change this to months, you're more than welcome to. So here we've got our planning horizon length. So this is going to be from our start date to our end date. How many days are in between that? Next, we've got our consider holidays for. This is going to be really important for more so on our production items, as this is going to include the weekends where we're not going to be producing those items. So based upon our capacity, what we're going to be able to fulfill these orders for. These are going to be set up elsewhere in Business One, and if you need help, certainly reach out to your consultant to help set up those holidays within SAP Business One. Here you can select whether it's just for the production items and purchase items. Again, the emphasis is probably going to be more so on the production items rather than the purchase items. It's purchase items don't really stop on the weekends. They're either traveling by plane, truck, or boat throughout those weekends. So usually we kind of exclude those holidays for the purchase items. So it's my best advice that everybody saves their MRP scenario as they're walking through each one of these steps. So I'm going to go ahead and do that here. I'm going to click next to toggle to my item selection menu. Now, again, another crucial step in our MRP wizard. This is going to include either all items or only a select amount of items that are within Business One. In this case, I'm going to do a selected items because I'm only running this for one item. The reason why this is so important is because you might not want to have all that information to show you your supply and your demand for each one of the items in your system, right? That could be really extensive. So in this case, what I'm going to do is drop my selection down here to my selected items. And then I'm going to go ahead and add some items here. The reason why this is so important is because we want to include also our parent items as well as our child items if you are in a manufacturing circumstance. So the first thing I'm going to do is just go one by one, select my VER-3.
That should pull up one item. Then I'm going to come back, and then I'm going to start picking out my MRP child items. So I've got my MRP child 1 and 2 here. Choose. Paste this. I'm going to do my MRP child 2. Click OK. And that'll bring in my child items. And then I've got one more item in my bill of materials box. This way, it'll tell us, take in consideration what's in stock for all 3 of our items, including our parent item, so that we might need to create a purchase order to obtain these 2 or 3 child items here. So once I'm happy with the items that I want to include in this MRP scenario, then I can go ahead and click Next. Again, saving the scenario is probably best practices. So as I mentioned before, there might be a variety of different circumstances where we want to run this for our entire company, or we want to run it for warehouse to warehouse, right? So maybe a group of warehouse. Here I've got a bunch of warehouses. I'm going to go ahead and select them all. I could also run this, most of our customers do run this by the warehouse. The reason why is because if they have multiple warehouses, be it physical, virtual, internal, or external, maybe we want to include the inventory transfers as well, or maybe we want to recommend those inventory transfer requests to be transferred from one warehouse to another. The only way that we're going to be able to do that is if we include it for the warehouse itself. So I'll go ahead and save my scenario, and I'll move to the next window. So this is where we kind of set up what supply and what demand we want to include in our MRP scenario. Again, I kind of have been mentioning that SAP is so date sensitive. However, what we can do is we can include historical data, which will go previous to our planning horizon, so that we can maybe include some historical information. This is going to be crucial whenever we select forecasts and things like that as well. So I'll go ahead and save that after every change I make. Next, we've got our sources of supply and demand to be included in the MRP calculation. So as we were talking about our available to promise earlier, this is going to be indicative of what supply and demand that we're going to be including into this MRP run. So what I want to do here is I'm just going to leave this very simple. I'm just going to do my purchase orders, my purchase blanket agreements, as well as my sales orders, sales blanket agreements, and production orders. If you are running multiple warehouses, what I would recommend is to include our inventory transfer requests, as obviously that's going to affect our demand here. Now, let's say, for example, I wanted to exclude certain sales orders. Maybe they were on hold or things like that. What I can do, and these are for all of our documents that we can include in our MRP wizard here, is select the document type that I want to restrict. And then I can select the actual documents that are going to be excluded from our MRP run. So as you can see here, we can limit our document number, our BP code, our delivery date, document date, so on and so forth. And maybe this at the very bottom is going to be helpful for a lot of our customers here, is to only include approved orders only. So for the time being, I'm just going to leave this open. I'm going to unselect all of these actually. Okay, where I can clear all documents too. So that'll show up in our restrict sales orders. And again, you can do this for all of our documents that we're including in our supply and demand here. Next, we can include our inventory level. This will be your required minimum, maximum, and then within our minimum and maximum. This is going to be very important if you're controlling the mins, maxes, or required inventory levels within the item master data itself. This is why we kind of refer to the item master data as the building block to MRP. Next, I can include a forecast as I created one earlier, my CD22. So that's going to pump in numbers that are either artificially creating demand or things like that. I'm going to go ahead and remove this for the time being, though. Next, SAP wants to know what it wants to spit out. So for example, in our case, we're not really using purchase requests. Let's say that my role with my company here is that I've got the correct approvals to place purchase orders. So I'm going to go ahead and set that recommendation to a purchase order. I also want to include inventory transfer request if I need to transfer stock from one warehouse to another. And then last but not least, where we want to see the demand from, right? So let's say, for example, our production order calls out a certain warehouse, right? We want to make sure that that stock is going to be going into that warehouse itself. So if I need to create a purchase order for item, the MRP child 1, I want to make sure that that is going to be created for that warehouse itself, the warehouse that needs it. So now that I've got everything set up here in my document data source, again, I'm going to go ahead and save this scenario, and then I'm going to go ahead and run my scenario. So with my scenario here, you're going to see that I've got a couple of recommendations here. So because all of my cells here are all kind of broken together and I can't see the whole cell, maybe this is more so the tips and tricks, but if I did want to expand all the cells to make sure that they all fit, what I can do is I can go to my view and then I can go to fit to column width. And this is going to bring everything together so that I can see it within our screen here. So as you can see here, we've got a plethora of recommendations. I do want to note that there are some color cues here within the MRP wizard to denote what the status is of these orders. So let's say, for example, let's start with the dates here. So our dates include those holidays. So as you can see here, our company is only working 4/10s. So we're going to exclude our Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for all of our production items. So we're going to need to add that to our lead time. So next, we've got our red numbers here that are indicative that, hey, we're not going to meet this demand that we've got for this item to include certain orders or to have that stock ready to create those items and to be ready to have those items on hand or to be shipped out. So if I wanted to go into this information here and see where this is coming from, I can go into what's known as my pegging information. So what I can do here is I can see where this is exactly coming from. So it looks like this one is coming or going to be recommended that we create a purchase order for this 1600. And again, you'll see that this is a recommendation here. If I wanted to break down this information a little bit more to see that supply and demand and where those things come from, what I can do is I can see my initial inventory and then my demand. This is probably going to be where you spend most of your time within the MRP wizard trying to figure out, if your information has been put in correct. So here we've got our box here, and these are all production orders that require this quantity for this item. And then we've also got a sales order for this item as well. Then as you can see for our parent item here, we've got our initial inventory, supply, and demand. And to meet that supply, we're going to need our 20 here. And this is going to be a recommendation to create a production order for 1208 to have this fulfilled for that sales order itself. So once I've gone in and I've validated that everything looks correct here, what I can do is I'm going to save my recommendations, and then I'm going to click finish. This is going to be wrapping up the MRP wizard, and now we're going to be going into actually creating those production orders and those sales orders. So now that I've gone through my MRP wizard and I've saved my order recommendations, what I'm going to need to do as my final step is actually go through and place those orders with those order recommendations. So what I'll do is I'll come back to my MRP and then go to my order recommendations. Here's going to be where we're sorting through and maybe sifting through all the information that we've got from our MRP scenario. So what we can do is we can go into our appropriate MRP scenario. So I'm going to click my CD22, and then I'm going to leave my dates as 1101, and then I'm going to change my due date to 1231 so that I know what to procure for the next 2 months here. Do 1230 again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave these items open so that it shows me all the items that I need to purchase within these due dates based upon this MRP scenario. So once I'm done, I'll click OK. And then here's all of my recommendations that we've got for from our MRP scenario here. So what we're going to do here is we'll create a variety of these. So the one things that I wanted to do was create a production order for my VER-3. And then what I wanted to also do was do my production orders for my MRP childs as well.
So another thing to note, if you do have this set up in Business One where you want to set a price for an item and it's not set in the item master data, we can manually set one here. We can also change this whenever we get onto the purchase order or production order itself. So I'll just make these $1 for demonstration's sake. And then the last thing we'll want to validate is that we've also got our to warehouse, so the warehouse that it's going to be received into, and then also the vendor that we want to set this up to be purchased from. So again, in this case, it looks like this item doesn't have a default vendor set up in SAP or in the item master data. So what I can do is I can just copy my vendor into our different tests. So once I've validated and I've got the correct quantities and everything that I want to be purchasing or producing, what I can do is I can click update. And here we'll get a confirmation from SAP Business One that we've created 3 new production orders and 1 document that was sent to approval. So it looks like we have an approval process for one of those vendors. So what I'll do now is I'll go into my production orders to see what SAP actually created. So what I'll do is I'll go into my production order and then I'll toggle to the next screen to see what was placed. So as you can see here, we've got our origin of MRP, meaning that this production order itself came from MRP. So we can also validate that we've got our correct quantity of 20 to be produced for this item. And this is going to be the same for our purchase orders as well. So now that we've gone through our MRP scenario, we've set up our item master data correctly, we've set up our forecast, and we've gone through and ran our MRP scenario to get those order recommendations and then actually place those orders. I just wanted to wrap up with some closing sentiments here. MRP does 2 things great. It doesn't forget and it doesn't forget. MRP can only be as good as the information that you provide in the system, right? If our sales order isn't correct, if our item master data isn't correct, and our MRP scenario isn't correct, then SAP is only going to spit out the information or recommendations based upon what we put into the system. So we need to make sure that everything is correct before we can even get and start thinking about MRP. MRP offers a real-time inclusive view into your inventory. So if your inventories or levels are correct, you've got all your orders in there, you'll be able to make more lean decisions about what you should be buying or making. Next, MRP only provides recommendations, which leads into my next point, meaning that it should be used by everybody. Because you're not actually placing actual purchase orders, purchase requests, inventory transfers, or production orders, what we can do is use it as a simulation, as a tool to kind of maybe boost our confidence into our inventory before we can start basing our recommendations to create those production orders, purchase orders, inventory requests, and so on. And also my favorite, if you guys are familiar with me and my background, I'm a certified Lean Six Sigma Green Belt, and this one really hits home with me. It really promotes a lean process in both your production, purchasing, and inventory processes, which allows a more lean inventory, which frees up more cash for you guys to be doing other things within your business. So I think MRP is great, and that you guys and that everyone could start implementing it into their system, maybe even just using it as a simulation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Josh. That was great. Great presentation, as always. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Clara.
We do have some questions, so let's try to get to some of these questions. So one of our users is asking, should I have one scenario or multiple scenarios? What helps me make that decision?
Yeah, so it's really based upon what you're looking to get out of that MRP scenario, right? There really isn't a limit on how many different scenarios we can have. If you do have multiple people that are working through MRP and are using that module, I think that everybody should have their own forecast, and then maybe you guys can compare notes based upon your recommendations and things like that. So I definitely would say there's no limit to it, but you know, just maybe not have it repetitive. We want to make
Okay.
sure that you guys are using this so that you can go back in and say, all right, all I have to do is just change my planning horizon date. So you just a simple run, and then you get your recommendations for that week, for that month, quarter, whatever that might be. So yeah.
Super. Another question is it critical to have order interval, multiple and minimum quantity set up in order for MRP to be run and be realistic?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So it depends. And this is why I wanted to answer this one live. And Nick, maybe we could talk about this offline, but it depends on your process, right? If you do have those fields, I would say absolutely make sure that you put that information in there, right? As I just said, MRP does two things great. It doesn't forget, and it also doesn't forget. Right?
I love that line.
Yeah. So I just, if you do have that information, certainly put that in there. However, it's not critical if you don't have that information to have it in the item master data. So it really just depends. And we can certainly walk you through setting that up, Nick, if you'd like after this call.
Fantastic. Another question is, can an item be both a make and a buy if you have both options?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we would do in this scenario is we would mark it as your, so in that planning tab or planning data tab, you would mark it as whatever the default is, whatever you most commonly do for that item, whether you buy or make. But what I would do is set that item to be a purchasing item so that you can put it onto purchase items itself.
Okay.
Or purchase orders and things like that. So yeah, just make sure that you've got that purchasing items checkbox selected, and you should be able to do either a production order or a purchase order.
Okay, super. Nick is also asking if you can expand upon using intelligent forecasts and how they differ from a simple forecast when using historical data. I don't know if you have time for that, Josh, or
yeah, and I think Andreas might have a webinar on this on the website that you can certainly watch, Nick. I'm not a statistical expert, although I did a lot of stats in college. That's more so based upon the triple exponential smoothing, and then like the seasonality included with that triple exponent or linear regression. Yeah, so the difference is going to be in, what scenario you're running. As far as your monthly averages and things like that, I think I briefly touched on that in the kind of the basic forecast. That's just going to be taking historical data from SAP and just doing a simple average based upon that. And then you can include based upon your deliveries and invoices, or just your sales orders itself. So it again kind of depends on what you're looking to get out of it. And we could certainly walk you through that maybe a little bit more offline.
Okay, fantastic. I'm going to try to give, I see that Greg, who is our expert in MRP and production, is here. I want to give you voice, Greg, to see. I think you're able to talk. I don't know if you wanted to reply to Gretchen on something.
No, thank you. Yeah, Gretchen, I saw your question on there, and just remember at Zurich, we're talking about using advanced manufacturing capabilities there, which will have additional MRP capabilities that will handle that make-buy decision for you on either individual basis or through some programming that we do.
Okay.
And also for Nick's question about the advanced scheduling, it does use an advanced algorithm to accommodate some statistics for seasonality and usage spikes and things like that. But yeah, there is a whole nother session that can be done. The advantage of that is it gives you the opportunity to look at those different scenarios, and you can make real-time live adjustments on those forecasts before actually saving them back into the forecast themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And Greg, to my knowledge, you have to have a certain level of transactional history to be running those because there's such long equations and statistical formats and things like that, right? We want to make sure that we have the appropriate amount of historical information within SAP Business One before we can generate those recommendations. So that's something else.
Yeah, that's a really good point to have the historical, and I think we recommend about 3 years worth of history before completely relying upon those, even though I don't suggest you completely rely upon them, because there's always that common knowledge business intelligence that you have your own personalities of what's going on with future sales and things that may not be visible to what the historical usage is.
Fantastic. I love this because I see another webinar coming up.
Yeah.
I see that there's a
Yes.
lot of interest in that in part 2 of MRP, actually going into intelligent forecast, etc. So again, thank you very much to all of you, to Josh, to Greg also for being here, and to all of you for joining and making the Customer Day a success. I highly recommend you to rate this session, ask any follow-up questions through email or even on the survey page if you have more ideas. As I mentioned, I'm going to be working with the team on creating a new webinar for Intelligent Forecast, part 2 of this content. Thank you so much, and I hope you also join the sessions that are still to happen. With the next one is on check printing, which is a very critical function for accountants and the finance function. And the last one is tips and tricks, always a user favorite. So really encourage you to join in that session as well. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
Everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.